In New York, on a sunny Wednesday morning, I saw my father for the first time in 10 years. It started like any other day in the city, the type of day I was used to, even if it still felt strange after everything that had happened. I had errands to run, mundane tasks that I'd grown accustomed to. First, I needed to pick up some bread from the bakery on the corner of 42nd Street, a little something to make dinner feel like a real meal. Then, I'd planned to stop by a shoe store on Fifth Avenue. A pair of boots had worn out, and a new pair was long overdue. It was the sort of routine I had long since stopped thinking about. I knew New York was chaotic, loud, and brash, yet I had come to love its rhythm. I had come to appreciate the chaos, to let it become the soundtrack of my daily life. But today, New York had something else in store. As I made my way down Fifth Avenue, dodging the endless parade of tourists, the city's hum felt particularly sharp in my ears. There was something in the air, a strange tension, but I couldn't place it. I reached the block with the department stores, the kind of place I had never been interested in: glassy facades and shiny displays. I was just passing by when I saw him. I froze. My heart stopped. My blood ran cold. There, standing in front of a store, casually perusing a display of leather jackets, was a man I hadn't seen in a decade. A man I thought had been lost to me forever. My father. He was unmistakable. The same tall figure, the same silver hair that had always looked a little too shiny for someone his age, the same calm, measured way he held himself. He was wearing the old leather jacket he always used to wear. I remembered it from the last time I saw him. All those years ago, the last time I saw him before he vanished from our lives without so much as a word. My chest tightened, and my breath caught in my throat. I stood rooted to the spot, staring at him, not knowing if I was hallucinating, or if the world had just tilted on its axis. How could it be him, after all these years, after everything? 10 years ago, my father disappeared. He left without saying a word, without leaving any trace of what had happened. The police had investigated, and we had hoped, for months, that he would return somehow, some way. But after the first year, the trail had gone cold. My sister, Claire, and I had clung to the hope that he was out there somewhere. But as the years passed, hope turned into doubt, and eventually, the authorities declared him dead. No body, no closure, only a disappearance that haunted us both, a mystery that lingered in the back of our minds. I shook my head, trying to snap myself out of whatever daze I was in. It couldn't be him. It had to be some kind of mistake, some illusion I had created out of the grief that had never truly left me. But then, I saw it: his walk. Slow, deliberate, the same easy stride that I had always recognized. He wasn't rushing, wasn't frantic. He was just strolling past, taking his time, as if he hadn't just vanished from my life for a decade. No, this was real. It was him. My legs felt like lead, but my feet started moving before my mind could catch up. I walked toward him, my body moving on autopilot. The city around me seemed to fade into a blur. I could hear the distant sounds of the usual New York chatter, the rush of traffic, but it all felt muffled as I closed the distance between us. Every step felt like an eternity. When I was only a few feet away, I reached out a trembling hand. I wasn't even sure what I was going to say. Was I going to call his name, ask him why he had disappeared, or was I just going to grab him and demand answers? But then, something happened. He turned, not toward me, not immediately, but just enough for me to catch a glimpse of his face. And then he walked into the store, disappearing inside without a second glance, as if nothing had changed, like we weren't standing there on the very street where 10 years of unanswered questions had started. I stood there for a moment, breathless, unsure of what to do. My mind spun in circles. How could he be here? How could he just walk away like that, like nothing ever happened? I didn't move at first, still trying to process everything. Was this a joke, a hallucination? Before I knew it, I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed Claire's number. She was the only one who would understand this panic. She'd been with me through the years of wondering where Dad had gone, always searching for answers, always holding on to that last thread of hope that one day he would come back. And now, here I was, seeing him again after all this time. The phone rang several times before she picked up. Claire, I gasped, barely able to get the words out. It's him. I saw him. I saw Dad. He's alive. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, waiting for me to explain. Wait, are you sure? Where are you? She asked, her voice trembling. I could hear the disbelief in her tone. but I didn't know how to make her understand what I had just seen. How could I explain the shock of seeing the man I thought was dead, standing in front of me like he had never left? I'm on Fifth Avenue, the store by the department store. He was standing there, looking at jackets, like nothing happened. Claire, I swear it was him. I don't know what to do. I can't just walk away. I don't know if I'm dreaming or what, but it was him. I heard her take a sharp breath. Don't move. I'm coming to you. Stay where you are. We need to figure this out. We need to know if this is really him. I can't move, Claire, I whispered, my voice trembling. I don't even know what to think anymore. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Stay there. Don't let him out of your sight. I nodded. Even though she couldn't see me, I couldn't tear my eyes away from the door to the store where my father had just walked in. My hands were still shaking, my body frozen in place. I didn't know if I wanted him to come back out, or if I wanted him to disappear again. I didn't know how to process this, how to process seeing him after so long, after everything we had been through. As I waited, the seconds felt like hours. Every thought in my mind clashed with the other, questions piling on top of questions. What had he been doing all this time? Why had he left us without a word? Did he even know how much pain his absence had caused? Did he know how long we had searched for him? Why was he here, now, in New York, standing in front of a store like nothing had ever happened? Claire arrived 10 minutes later, breathless, her eyes wide with concern. Where is he? She asked, looking around frantically. I don't know, I muttered. He went inside. I don't know what to do. We're not leaving here until we figure out what's going on, Claire said, her voice steady, but there was an edge to it now, a tension I had never heard before. Together, we moved toward the store. Claire and I stand in front of the store, staring at the door he walked through. The silence between us is thick, broken only by the hum of the city around us. Are you sure it was him? Claire asked again, her voice tight with a mixture of disbelief and anxiety. I nodded, my hands still trembling. There's no mistake, Claire. It was him. I saw his face, his eyes, the way he walked. It was him. Claire's brow furrowed as she glanced around the sidewalk. People were milling about, their lives continuing, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. But for us, everything had changed. The father we had both lost, the man we thought we would never see again, was just inside that store, alive. And yet, here we were, unsure of how to move forward. I looked at the doors to the store, feeling a surge of urgency building inside me. We need to talk to someone in there, find out where he went, why he's here. Claire hesitated for a moment, glancing at the glass doors with skepticism. What if he doesn't want to be found? What if I don't care? I interrupted, more forcefully than I meant to. He can't just walk out of our lives like that and leave us with nothing. I need answers. Claire, we need to know what happened to him. Why he left, why he came back. Claire sighed but nodded. She understood. We had spent 10 years trying to move on, trying to live without knowing the truth about our father's disappearance. And now, suddenly, there he was, alive and well, in front of us. It felt like a cruel twist of fate, like the universe had given us a second chance only to rip it away again. We pushed open the door to the store, stepping into the cool, air-conditioned interior. The scent of leather and expensive perfume filled the air, and the store was brightly lit, with shiny displays of clothes, shoes, and accessories. There were a few customers browsing, but no sign of my father. I walked toward the nearest sales associate, a young woman who was tidying up a display of handbags. Excuse me, I said, my voice shaking slightly, but I forced myself to stay calm. I need to know if you saw a man who just came in. He was wearing a leather jacket, and the woman looked up, a polite but distant smile on her face. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not sure, please. I cut her off, desperation creeping into my voice. It's really important. He came in just a few minutes ago, tall, gray hair, wearing a leather jacket. Did you see him? Her expression softened, but she didn't seem entirely sure. I don't remember anyone like that, ma'am. People come and go all the time, and I'm usually focused on. I wasn't about to let her brush me off. My eyes scanned the store, and that's when I saw the security desk at the far end. A burly man in a black suit was sitting behind a desk, typing something into his computer. My heart skipped a beat. He might know something. I grabbed Claire's arm and pulled her with me toward the desk. The security guard looked up as we approached. He gave us a stern look, but I wasn't backing down. Excuse me, I said, keeping my voice steady, though it felt like everything inside me was about to unravel. I'm looking for someone, a man who just came in. He's my father. He's been missing for 10 years. Please, do you know where he went? The guard raised an eyebrow, clearly not used to such a request. He leaned back in his chair and studied me for a moment, sizing us up. Missing for 10 years. Huh, that's a long time. I'm not sure what I can do, but I'll check the cameras. Claire stepped forward. Please, we need to know if he left. It's important. The guard's expression softened just a little, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. All right, I'll take a look. He turned to his computer, clicking a few buttons and bringing up the security footage from the last few minutes. Claire and I exchanged a nervous glance, both of us holding our breath. Seconds dragged by as the screen filled with static, before it cleared to show the view from the store's entrance. I watched closely, my eyes scanning the footage for any sign of my father. There, on the screen, I saw him, my father, walking toward the back of the store, his leather jacket unmistakable. The footage was grainy, but there was no mistaking the way he moved, the way he held himself. I gasped, barely able to contain the shock rising in my chest. There he is. That's him. The security guard looked at the screen, his face impassive. He went through the back door, he said. Employees only. I felt my heart sink. The back door. What was he doing back there? Was he meeting someone? Was he trying to avoid us? Can you let us go back there? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice again. Please, I need to talk to him. The guard hesitated, glancing between the footage and us. Finally, he stood up and sighed. Look, I'm not supposed to let customers go back there, but ... He shrugged. If you really need to find him, you might try the service area. Just don't make a scene. Claire and I exchanged a look, and without wasting another second, we followed the guard through a narrow hallway that led to the back of the store. As we walked, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Every step felt like a step closer to something I wasn't prepared for, something that could shatter everything I thought I knew. The back area was dimly lit, with boxers stacked against the walls and a few staff members quietly working. It felt like another world, a world that had nothing to do with the busy store in front. The guard led us to a small door at the end of the hallway and knocked lightly. Anyone in there? He called out. There was no response, just silence. He knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Claire stepped forward, her hand resting on the door handle. What if he's gone? She whispered. He's in there, I said, feeling the certainty flood through me. I didn't know how I knew, but I could feel it in my bones. This was where the answers lay. I took a deep breath and turned the handle. The room beyond the door was small, cluttered with supplies, boxes, and half-empty shelves. There were a few staff members moving quietly, sorting stock or chatting in hushed voices. It didn't look like the kind of place someone would hide, but there was something about the atmosphere that felt off. The air felt heavier in here, as if this was a space not meant for anyone like us. I glanced around, trying to keep my composure, though I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. My father had been in here. I was sure of it. The security guard stepped aside, a silent offer to go in first. Claire and I exchanged a look before stepping into the dimly lit room, the door closing softly behind us. There were no windows, just a single overhead light flickering faintly, casting shadows over the stacked boxes. The space smelled faintly of dust and old paper far removed from the fresh scent of the department store outside. Is this it? Claire whispered, her voice tight with tension. Is this where he was? I think so, I murmured, though the uncertainty crept back. But where did he go? Why would he come back here? What was he doing? Just then, a voice interrupted our thoughts. A young woman in a store uniform, looking surprised to see us, stepped forward. Can I help you with something? She asked, clearly unsure of our presence in the back room. Before either Claire or I could speak, the security guard spoke up, his voice low but firm. They're looking for someone who came in earlier, a man in a leather jacket. Do you know where he went? The woman's expression shifted slightly, and I noticed a subtle flicker of something in her eyes, something that could have been recognition, maybe even guilt. She hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. I didn't see anyone like that. You'd have to ask the manager about that. I could feel the frustration building up inside me. But we saw him on the cameras, I said, my voice rising slightly. We know he was here. Why is everyone acting like they don't know anything? Claire put a hand on my arm, trying to calm me down, but I couldn't help it. The answers were so close, and yet everything seemed to be slipping through my fingers. I looked at the security guard, my patience wearing thin. We need to find him, now. The guard nodded, his expression softening just a bit. All right, I'll talk to the manager. You wait here. He turned and walked toward the back office, leaving Claire and me in the small room, feeling more isolated than ever. I leaned against one of the boxers, trying to steady my breathing. The uncertainty was overwhelming. What was my father doing here? What had happened to him all these years? Had he been hiding from us? And if so, why? Claire crossed her arms, her gaze wandering around the room as she spoke, her voice laced with worry. Do you think he's been here all this time? Just ... living like this? Why didn't he contact us? Why didn't he come home? None of this makes sense. I shook my head, feeling the weight of the years of unanswered questions pressing down on me. I don't know, but something's not right. He wouldn't just leave us, not without a reason. There has to be an explanation, and I'm going to find it. The sound of footsteps interrupted our conversation, and the security guard returned, followed by a tall man in a suit. The manager, I assumed. He had a stern look on his face, his eyes darting between us as if trying to size up the situation. Can I help you, ladies? He asked, his tone businesslike but with a hint of discomfort. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. We're looking for someone who came into the store earlier, a man in a leather jacket. He's my father, and he's been missing for 10 years. We know he came in here, and we need to know where he went. The manager stiffened, his gaze flickering away from mine for just a split second. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice unnervingly calm. I haven't seen anyone matching that description today. Maybe you're mistaken. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After all we had been through, all the years of wondering, of searching, this man was denying that my father had ever been here. No, I said, stepping forward, my voice more insistent now. We saw him on the cameras. We know he was here. Don't lie to me. The manager's eyes shifted uncomfortably, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his composure. I really don't know what you're talking about, he repeated, but there was something in his voice, now something that suggested he was hiding something. I stepped even closer, narrowing my eyes. We know you're lying. If you don't tell us where he is, I swear I'll call the police. You can't keep hiding him. At my words, the manager seemed to hesitate. For a long moment, he didn't speak, his gaze flickering to the security guard, then back to Claire and me. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders slumping in resignation. Look, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but I'll tell you this. We've had someone in and out of this store over the last few weeks. He's been asking for things, stuff we don't usually sell. What kind of stuff? Claire asked, her voice urgent. The manager ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. Old files, paperwork, legal documents. He came in looking for something specific, something from years ago, but I didn't think much of it. I didn't know who he was. I thought he was just some weirdo with too much time on his hands. My heart skipped a beat. Legal documents? What kind of documents? He glanced nervously at the security guard before speaking in a low voice. Look, I don't know the details, but I think he was trying to find something about the store, maybe even some old business records. I don't know, but he paid a lot of money to get access to things no one else could. That's all I know. This was it. This was the breakthrough I had been hoping for. My father had been searching for something, a piece of his past, a clue, something that had kept him coming back to this store for weeks. And now, with this information, I was closer than ever to uncovering the truth. The room felt suffocating. The walls were closing in, and I could almost feel the weight of all the secrets this store had been hiding. Claire and I exchanged a tense glance as we followed the manager down a narrow corridor that led to what appeared to be the store's archive room. It was tucked away behind an unmarked door, a place no customer would ever stumble upon, let alone get access to, the kind of place that felt like it had been forgotten by the world, or worse, intentionally hidden.
The manager led us to a small desk cluttered with papers, a set of filing cabinets looming beside it. These are the documents he was asking about, he said, opening a drawer. Old records, stuff from back when this store was first opened. We don't usually deal with this anymore. But a few weeks ago, he came asking for it. I could barely keep my hands from shaking as I reached out and pulled one of the files from the drawer. The thick folder was covered in dust, untouched for years. My heart raced as I flipped it open. There, right on the first page, was my father's name, written in bold, unmistakable letters. The paperwork seemed like a strange mixture of old business contracts, receipts, and legal documents, most of which I couldn't make sense of at first glance. But my father's name appeared again and again, along with a few other names I didn't recognize. Was this about his business dealings? His past? Why would he have been looking for this? Before I could get too far into the folder, I felt Claire tugging at my sleeve. "Look at this," she whispered urgently, pointing to a specific document in the stack. It was a deed. A property deed, to be exact. The address was one I knew well, the house we had lived in, the one our family had called home before everything fell apart. The house that had been sold after my father's disappearance. But this deed wasn't the one we had seen. The name on the deed wasn't my mother's or mine. It was my father's, yes, but it was followed by another name. The name of a business partner I had never heard of. Why would he keep something like this? I muttered, my voice tight. Why didn't we know about this? Claire's face went pale as she skimmed through the rest of the paperwork. It looks like he was planning something. Something big. This is about ownership, business dealings, and assets. And we never knew. I closed the folder and stood up quickly, a wave of dizziness crashing over me. We need to find him. He came here looking for something about this. And I think it has to do with why he disappeared. Just as I spoke, the door to the archive room swung open, and the security guard stepped in, his face grim. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and urgent. I could feel the tension in the air immediately. "What is it?" I demanded, not sure whether I was ready to hear what he had to say. He looked at the manager, who was standing silently behind me, his arms crossed over his chest. The guard's gaze shifted to Claire and me, and for a brief moment, I thought he was going to back out of whatever it was he needed to say. But instead, he dropped his voice lower, almost a whisper. "You're not the only ones looking for him," he said. "There are others. People who've been asking about your father too. And they've been asking about that deed." I felt my stomach twist. "What do you mean, others?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "Who else is looking for him?" The guard hesitated. "I can't say much. But I've seen some people come and go in this store over the last few weeks. They've been asking the same questions you are. They know about the property, about the records. It's not just your father who's been interested in this stuff." I could feel the world around me start to spin. Who are these people? Why are they interested in him? The guard shrugged. "I don't know. But it doesn't feel right. And I don't think you should be asking these questions here. It's dangerous, believe me. Whoever they are, they're not just looking for paperwork. They're looking for something else." Claire stepped forward. "What do you mean, dangerous? What are you trying to tell us?" "I'm telling you," the guard said, voice low and urgent, "I've seen them. They've been coming to this store for weeks, and they don't want anyone to know. They'll do whatever it takes to get what they want. If they find out you're looking for him, they'll come after you, too." A chill ran down my spine. This was getting darker than I had ever imagined. First, the mystery of my father's disappearance, then the cryptic documents, and now this. There were people, dangerous people, who were looking for the same answers we were. Where are these people now? I asked, my voice cold. The guard looked over his shoulder, then stepped closer to us, lowering his voice even further. "They're not here. Not right now. But they won't stop. You need to leave, now. If you keep digging into this, you might not just be uncovering your father's past. You might be digging into something much bigger." I felt the weight of his words sink in. There were forces at play here that I couldn't even begin to understand, and they were linked to my father's disappearance, to the property deed, to everything I thought I knew about my family. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. "Thank you," I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. We didn't have time to argue. We needed answers, and we needed them now. "Get out," the guard urged, his voice clipped. "And don't come back. Not until you know what you're dealing with." We turned and left the room, the door clicking shut behind us. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Who were these people? What were they looking for? And why had my father been caught up in this? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't just about a missing father anymore. This was about something far bigger, and I was about to get pulled into a mess I might never be able to get out of. The streets of New York felt like they were pressing in on me, the weight of everything I had just learned heavy on my shoulders. I could feel Claire beside me, her silence just as thick as mine. We hadn't spoken much since we left the store, and I think we were both trying to process everything. The guard's warning, the cryptic references to dangerous people, the sudden revelation that my father had been involved in something bigger, something darker, than I had ever imagined. As we walked, the city seemed to blur around me. The noise of honking horns and the chatter of pedestrians faded into a dull hum, and all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. My father hadn't just disappeared. He hadn't left because of some personal crisis or mental breakdown. No, it was worse than that. He had gotten tangled up in something dangerous. And now, Claire and I were knee-deep in it. We turned a corner, walking toward the small cafe we had been frequenting lately. We needed a place to sit, to gather our thoughts, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just paranoia, I could feel it, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I stopped abruptly, my eyes scanning the street, but there was no one out of place, no one who stood out. But the sensation remained, lingering in the air like a storm waiting to break. "Claire," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "do you feel like we're being followed?" She glanced over her shoulder quickly, but there was nothing behind us. Just a couple of tourists chatting and a few locals hurrying by. "No one's following us," she said, but even as she said it, I could see the doubt in her eyes. She was feeling it, too. We were both on edge. We continued walking, but I felt a tightening in my chest with every step. We hadn't made much progress, and yet it felt like we were already in over our heads. The truth was, I didn't know how much more I could handle. Claire had always been the one to keep me grounded, but even she seemed shaken now. The more we dug, the more dangerous things seemed to get. We arrived at the cafe, and I suggested we sit outside on the small patio. It felt safer here, a little less exposed. We ordered coffee, but neither of us really drank it. Instead, we sat in silence, both lost in our thoughts. "I don't know where to go from here," I admitted, my voice strained. "We don't even know who these people are, why they're after the same thing we are." Claire stirred her coffee, her face tense. "We can't stop now, though. We're this close to figuring it out. If Dad was mixed up in something like this, it's only a matter of time before we get to the bottom of it. We need to keep pushing." I nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure I believed it. The guard's warning echoed in my mind: "You don't know what you're dealing with." He was right. We were in deep, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how little I actually knew. My father wasn't just missing, he was involved in something far beyond our understanding. And now, Claire and I were caught up in it, too. Just as I was about to speak again, my phone rang, startling both of us. I pulled it from my bag, checking the screen. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local. Hesitantly, I answered. "Hello?" There was a long pause on the other end, the silence stretching uncomfortably. Then, a low voice spoke. "Are you looking for your father?" the voice asked, the words cold and deliberate. My blood ran cold. I glanced at Claire, who was staring at me with wide eyes. "Who is this?" I demanded, my heart hammering in my chest. "Someone who knows exactly where your father is," the voice said. "But I wouldn't go looking for him if I were you. There are people who are much better at finding him than you are." Before I could respond, the line went dead, the call cutting off abruptly. I stared at the phone, my hand trembling. "Who was that?" Claire asked, her voice urgent. I don't know. But they knew about my father. And they said they knew where he was." "Do you think it's them? The people the security guard was talking about?" I didn't know. I couldn't be sure, but I had the distinct feeling that we were being played. Whoever was on the other end of that call wasn't just trying to warn me, they were trying to intimidate me. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had no idea who I was really up against. We sat there for a long time, both of us lost in thought. The phone call had only deepened the mystery. Whoever was behind this, whoever had been looking for my father, was getting closer. And the more we searched, the more we risked being dragged into something we didn't fully understand. I had been so sure of my determination to find my father, to get the answers we deserved, but now, doubt had crept in. Was it worth it? Were we risking everything for a truth that might destroy us both? We need to find more answers, Claire said, breaking the silence. We can't back down now. Not after everything. She was right, of course. We couldn't stop. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the closer we got to the truth, the more we were losing control. The situation was spiraling, and I wasn't sure how much longer we could hold on. The call had unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. The voice on the other end had been calm, collected, but there was an undercurrent of threat that was unmistakable. I could feel the weight of the words hanging in the air. There are people who are much better at finding him than you are. The implication was clear. There were forces at play here far beyond anything Claire or I had bargained for. But the question was, who were these people? And why had they been so keen to send that cryptic warning? We sat in the cafe for a long time, barely speaking. The minutes ticked by, each one heavier than the last. I kept replaying the conversation in my mind, turning over every detail, every word. But no matter how many times I went over it, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in too deep. Eventually, Claire broke the silence. We need to go back to the store, she said, her voice steady but determined. We've got to find out more. We can't just sit here and wonder. I nodded, even though doubt still gnawed at me. I had no idea what we would find by going back, but I knew one thing for certain: the longer we waited, the more control we were losing. The mystery of my father's disappearance, of what had happened to him all those years ago, was slipping through our fingers, and I couldn't stand the thought of it being out of our reach forever. We stood up and left the cafe, the chill of the evening air hitting me like a slap in the face. I hadn't even realized how late it had gotten. The sun had dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows across the city streets. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, that we were walking into a trap we didn't even know existed. When we arrived at the store, I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach things. Should we go in through the front? No, that seemed too obvious. But before I could come up with a plan, a figure emerged from the shadows just outside the store's entrance. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. It was the security guard. He looked around quickly, making sure no one was watching, then waved us over urgently. Come here, he whispered, his voice low and anxious. I need to talk to you. We exchanged a glance before quickly stepping over to him. The guard led us behind the store, into the alleyway that ran alongside it. The streetlights flickered above us, casting a dim glow on the ground as we followed him, our footsteps echoing in the empty space. What's going on? Claire asked, her voice tight with suspicion. Why are we meeting out here? The guard glanced over his shoulder, making sure we were alone before he spoke. I didn't want to say anything earlier, he began, his voice hurried, but I'm not just some store security guard. I've been working on something for a while. Something that might help you. I felt a strange twist in my gut. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice low, not sure whether I was more curious or wary. He took a deep breath, then spoke in a hushed tone. Your father was involved in something big. Something dangerous. And he didn't disappear just because he wanted to leave. He was forced to. But he didn't go down without a fight. He knew people, dangerous people, and he had something they wanted. That deed you found? It's part of the bigger picture. There's more at play here than you realize. I exchanged a stunned look with Claire. My father, forced to leave? What had happened? And why had the guard waited so long to tell us this? Why are you telling us this now? Claire asked, her voice tinged with frustration. Why didn't you tell us earlier? The guard hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting nervously around the alley. I couldn't. I've been watching my back ever since I started helping your father. But you're not the only ones looking for him. There are people out there who will stop at nothing to get what your father had. And they've been watching you. They know you're onto something, and they'll come after you if you keep digging. I took a step closer to him. What do you mean, people have been watching us? Who are they? The guard's expression tightened, his lips pressing into a thin line. They're part of a group. A group that's been around for decades. They work in the shadows, pulling the strings behind businesses, politics, everything. Your father was involved with them before he disappeared, and whatever he was holding onto, whatever he had hidden, they'll stop at nothing to find it. The words felt like a punch to the gut. I had thought we were chasing a simple family mystery, a disappearance, maybe some betrayal, but now it seemed like we were tangled in something much darker. The deed, the guard continued, his voice quiet but urgent, it's not just a property document. It's tied to something else. Something bigger than anyone knows. Your father didn't leave because he wanted to. He was forced to protect something, and whatever that thing is, it's worth a lot more than just land. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. What was he protecting? What is it? He looked around again, then took a deep breath. I don't know exactly what it is. But I know where it is. And I can take you there. It's dangerous, though. If you want to find out what your father was hiding, you need to trust me. Claire and I stood there, trying to process what he was saying. There was no way we could back down now. But there was no turning back either. The truth was just within reach, but at what cost? I glanced at Claire, who nodded silently. We were in this together, no matter how dangerous it got. I'll go, I said, my voice steady but full of resolve. We need to know. We can't stop now. The guard gave us a hard look, as if weighing our decision. Finally, he spoke. You're both sure about this? We both nodded. All right, he said, pulling out a small key from his pocket. This will get you inside. But you need to be quick. The people I've been talking to won't let you get away with it if they find out. Get in, find what your father hid, and get out. And don't trust anyone. We took the key from him, our hands cold as ice. Everything was about to change. There was no going back. The night had settled in fully now, the streets empty and quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic. The air was thick with tension as we followed the security guard down narrow, twisting alleyways, away from the main roads. The key in my pocket felt like it weighed a ton, my fingers brushing against it every few seconds as if it were some kind of talisman, except I wasn't sure if it would protect us or condemn us. We moved in silence, our footsteps echoing on the damp concrete, the world around us swallowed by shadows. Claire walked a few steps ahead of me, her pace quick but cautious. She was as determined as I was, but I could tell by the set of her jaw that she was feeling the weight of everything we had uncovered. We both were. After what felt like an eternity of twisting corners and passing rusted doors, we reached a small, unmarked building at the edge of a dead-end street. It looked like an old warehouse, nothing special, except the eerie feeling that seemed to cling to it. The security guard motioned for us to stop as we approached the door. This is it, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. This is where it all started. But you need to be careful. There are cameras, motion sensors, all sorts of security in there. You'll need to move quickly and quietly. Claire looked at me, her brow furrowed. What is this place? It's where your father kept everything. The records, the files, the stuff he didn't want anyone to find. But he didn't trust just anyone. Not even the people who worked for him, the guard replied, his voice tinged with a warning. Whatever's in there is the reason he disappeared. And if these people get their hands on it, then we'll never get the answers we need, I finished for him. My heart pounded harder with every word. The guard handed me the key, his hand lingering for a moment longer than necessary. Once you're inside, you have to move fast. I'll keep watch outside. I don't know how much longer I can help you. I nodded, slipping the key into the lock. The door creaked open, the smell of stale air and dust immediately hitting us as we stepped inside. It was dark, too dark to make out much. I pulled out my phone, using its flashlight to guide our way. The walls were lined with shelves, all crammed with boxes and filing cabinets. But this wasn't just some storage space. It felt like a vault, a secret archive of everything my father had kept hidden for years. I took a deep breath, my hand still gripping the flashlight. Let's find what we came for. We started scanning the room, searching the boxes for anything that could lead us to the answers we were looking for. Papers, files, old photographs, everything felt like it could be a clue, but it was hard to know where to begin. It wasn't just about finding what my father had hidden, it was about understanding why he'd hidden it. Look, Claire said, her voice sharp with discovery. She had pulled out an old leather-bound journal from one of the shelves. It was worn, the edges of the pages frayed, but the initials embossed on the front were unmistakable. This is Dad's handwriting. I rushed over to her, my heart hammering in my chest. She flipped it open, skimming through the pages. The entries were sparse, but there was a recurring name, Victor Hayes. I knew the name. Victor Hayes had been a business associate of my father's before his disappearance. They had partnered on some deals, but my father had always kept his distance from him. I never understood why, but something about this name made my stomach turn. Claire kept reading, her eyes widening. This doesn't make sense, she murmured. It looks like your father was working with Hayes on something big. Something illegal. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean? There are references to money laundering, offshore accounts, shady deals. This is big, Emma. This is way bigger than we thought. Claire's voice was trembling now, but she kept reading. It looks like your father was trying to get out of it. He wanted to stop whatever this was before it consumed him. A knot formed in my throat. So, my father hadn't just disappeared to escape his life or some personal struggle. He'd been involved in something dangerous, something far beyond what we could ever have imagined. I snatched the journal from her hands. What did he find? What was he trying to protect? As I flipped through the pages, one entry stood out. It was dated 2 days before his disappearance. Hayes has plans. I can't trust him anymore. I found something, proof that could destroy everything. But if I disappear, it's on him. I'll protect it with my life. The words hit me like a punch. My father had been protecting something that could destroy Hayes and whatever crooked empire he was building. That was why he had disappeared. But what had he found? And where was it now? Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. My heart leapt into my throat. The guard had been supposed to keep watch outside, but we didn't know if he was still there, or if someone else had found us. I quickly shoved the journal back into the shelf and grabbed Claire's arm, pulling her toward the back of the room. We need to get out of here, I whispered urgently. But as we turned, a cold voice cut through the darkness, freezing us in our tracks. I don't think you're going anywhere. I froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was Victor Hayes. He stepped out from the shadows, flanked by 2 men in dark suits. Hayes was taller than I remembered, his face gaunt and sharp, his eyes gleaming with a cold, calculating malice. I could feel the air in the room shift, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. You've been digging into things that don't concern you, Hayes said, his tone chillingly calm. And now, it's time to pay the price for your curiosity. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. Where is he? I demanded, my voice shaky but defiant. Where's my father? Hayes smiled, a slow, sinister curl of his lips. Your father? He was a fool. He tried to escape, but you can't outrun the people you've wronged. But you, he gestured to me and Claire, you've got one more chance to walk away. Leave now, and I'll forget we ever met. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears. There was no running now. Not after everything we had uncovered. No more pretending we could just walk away from this. I straightened my back, trying to appear braver than I felt. We're not leaving until we get answers. Hayes laughed softly, the sound echoing in the empty room. You think you have the luxury of choice, girl? You don't know what you're dealing with. But I was done being afraid. Whatever was coming next, whatever danger we were about to face, it wasn't just for my father anymore. It was for Claire, for me, for everything we had lost over the past 10 years. And I wasn't going to let him walk away with the last piece of the puzzle. The air between us was thick with tension. Victor Hayes, standing there with his cold smile and calculating gaze, seemed to relish the moment, savoring his power over us. His 2 bodyguards flanked him, their eyes scanning us with the same level of indifference that came with knowing they held the upper hand. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I could feel my pulse quickening, but it wasn't from fear, it was from the burning need to uncover the truth. We had come too far, sacrificed too much, to back down now. I stepped forward, defiance in my every movement. You're not going to get away with this. Not after everything you've done. Not after what you did to my father. Hayes' smile only widened, but there was a slight flicker in his eyes, a sign that perhaps he was starting to realize we weren't the frightened children we had once been. Your father was weak, he said, his voice low but laced with venom. He couldn't handle the pressure. But you? You're different. You've got guts. I'll give you that. But it doesn't matter. You're too late. Everything's already in motion. Not if we stop it, I retorted, my voice steady, though my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Where is it? The thing my father was protecting? What's so important that he had to risk everything to hide it? Victor took a step closer, his eyes glinting with something darker. You want the truth, he sneered. Fine. Your father was protecting a list. A list of people, businesses, government officials, all the players who've been in on this for years. He got cold feet, and when he found out what was really happening, he tried to destroy it. But it's too late now. The money's already been laundered. The deals have been made. And that list is worth more than you could ever imagine. My mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. A list. A list of names that could bring down an entire network of corruption. That was what my father had been hiding. That was what had cost him everything. You don't understand, Hayes continued, his voice growing more menacing. You can't stop this. You're just pawns in a game you don't even know how to play. My people will find you, and when they do, there won't be any place left for you to hide. Just as I thought things couldn't get worse, I heard the sharp click of a door opening behind us. I turned, my heart skipping a beat, and saw the security guard, the one who had helped us, standing there, a gun in his hand. Get away from them, he commanded, his voice firm. Hayes' eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in anger. You're the one who's been helping them. You've made a huge mistake. The security guard didn't flinch. I'm not going to let you get away with this. Not anymore. For a split second, everything stood still. The room was frozen, the threat hanging in the air, as if the world was waiting to see how this would end. I didn't know if the guard was ready to fight or if this was just a last-ditch effort to stall, but I could feel my breath catch in my throat. And then, everything happened all at once. Victor made a move to lunge forward, but the guard fired a warning shot into the ceiling, the sound of the gunshot ringing out like a deafening explosion. Hayes froze, his face contorting in fury. His bodyguards took a step back, their hands twitching toward their own weapons, but the guard kept his gun aimed at them. I don't want any trouble, the guard said, his voice steady. But if you make a move, I'll make sure it's the last one. Victor Hayes wasn't used to being challenged. He had lived in the shadows for too long, hiding behind his power and his money. And now, in the face of the truth, facing the consequences of his own actions, he was losing control. For a long, tense moment, Hayes just stared at the guard, then at us. There was a flicker of realization, an understanding that things were finally slipping away from him. This isn't over, he spat, his voice laced with venom. You think you've won? You've only just begun to understand the depths of this. Before anyone could react, he turned and bolted toward the back of the warehouse, his bodyguards hesitating for a fraction of a second before they followed suit. But the guard was already moving, his gun aimed at the doorway, ready to stop them if they tried anything. But they didn't. They disappeared into the darkness, and the room fell silent. The security guard lowered his weapon, his hands shaking slightly. "It's over," he said quietly. "They're gone." I stood there, unable to move, my heart still racing. It felt surreal, like I had just woken up from a nightmare, but the reality of what had just happened, the truth about my father, about Hayes, about everything, was starting to sink in. We had stopped them. But at what cost? Claire stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "What now?" she asked softly. "We go to the authorities," I said, my voice steadier now. "We take everything we've learned. The journal. The list. We make sure it gets out." The guard nodded, but his expression was grim. "They won't stop looking for it. But at least now, you have a chance." As we walked out of the warehouse, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. The city seemed different now, quieter, as if the weight of everything that had happened had finally settled. The past 10 years, of grief, uncertainty, and unanswered questions, had led to this moment, this painful, difficult truth. My father hadn't just disappeared. He had fought to protect us all from something much bigger than we had ever imagined. And now, the battle was ours to finish. The truth had come out, and the people who had hidden it for so long would face the consequences. It wasn't a victory we could celebrate, but it was justice. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like we had finally reclaimed the one thing we had been searching for all along, the truth. Author's note. This story shows the complexities of family, trust, and betrayal. In the end, the truth often comes at a high price, but it's the only thing that can set us free. My protagonist and her sister, through their courage, were able to confront the dangerous forces that had overshadowed their lives for so long. Their journey is a reminder that, even in the face of overwhelming odds, the pursuit of justice is a cause worth fighting for.